Here's an accusation you've probably heard, maybe even said yourself at some point. You can't be a real scientist and believe in miracles. Pick one. The logic seems obvious on the surface. Science is the study of natural laws, consistent, repeatable, predictable patterns in nature. A miracle, by definition, is an exception to those patterns. So a scientist who believes in miracles looks like someone quietly holding two contradictory rulebooks at once. But I want to push back on that today, and not with a sentimental argument, with a structural one. Because when you actually trace where the scientific method came from, and what it requires to function at all, you find something surprising. The very framework that makes science possible was built, historically and philosophically, on assumptions that come from a Christian view of the universe. A universe that is normally rational and law-governed, precisely because it was made by a rational lawgiver who occasionally, purposefully, acts outside the pattern. Believing in miracles, it turns out, isn't automatically anti-science. In some ways, it's the worldview science quietly depends on. Let's start with something scientists rarely stop to justify. Because it's so foundational, they simply take it for granted. The universe follows consistent laws. Every experiment ever run depends on this assumption. When a chemist repeats a reaction in a lab, they're trusting that the same conditions will produce the same result today, tomorrow, and next year. When an astronomer calculates the trajectory of a spacecraft, they're trusting that gravity behaves the same way near Jupiter as it does near Earth. Without that assumption, that nature is orderly, consistent, and not arbitrary, there is no experiment, no prediction, no science at all. You just have a universe of chaotic, disconnected events with no reason to expect any pattern to hold from one moment to the next. Here's the philosophical problem. Nothing about pure, unguided matter and chance requires that assumption to be true. If the universe is simply the product of blind physical processes with no mind behind it, there's no particular reason to expect it to be orderly, elegant, or mathematically consistent across billions of years and billions of light years. It could just as easily be arbitrary, chaotic, or inconsistent in ways we'd never be able to detect or trust. So where did scientists get the confidence to assume otherwise? Historically, many of them got it from their theology. Figures like Isaac Newton, Robert Boyle, and Johannes Kepler weren't setting faith aside to do science. They were doing science because their faith told them the universe was the orderly product of a rational creator, and therefore worth investigating with careful, repeatable methods. Kepler once described his astronomical work as thinking God's thoughts after him. That's not a metaphor tacked on afterward. That conviction is part of what gave early scientists the confidence that hunting for consistent mathematical laws in nature was a project actually worth doing. Now here's where the common objection falls apart, and it comes down to a simple but often missed distinction. A miracle doesn't deny that natural laws exist. It presupposes them. Think about what it would even mean to call something miraculous. If the universe had no reliable patterns to begin with, if water sometimes just turned to wine on its own, randomly for no particular reason, then Jesus turning water to wine at a wedding in Cana wouldn't be remarkable at all. It would just be Tuesday. The entire concept of a miracle only makes sense against a backdrop of dependable, repeatable natural order. You need the rule to recognize the exception. This is actually the classical Christian understanding of miracles. Going back through theologians like Augustine and Aquinas, a miracle isn't God breaking his own laws in some chaotic or arbitrary way. It's the same rational God who normally sustains the universe through consistent, describable patterns, choosing on rare, specific, purposeful occasions to act directly for a reason, in a way that goes beyond those patterns. The very rarity and specificity of a miracle is what gives it meaning. It's the exception that requires the rule to make sense as an exception at all. So, when a scientist affirms both realities, that nature ordinarily runs according to consistent laws, and that the God who set those laws in place occasionally acts outside the ordinary pattern for a purpose, they're not contradicting themselves. They're actually holding a more internally coherent view than a purely materialist one, because their belief in orderly natural law and their belief in occasional miracles come from the very same source, a rational personal creator who is both consistent and free. It's worth addressing the most famous argument against believing in miracles at all, because it still gets repeated constantly, often without people knowing where it came from. The 18th century philosopher David Hume argued that because miracles are, by definition, violations of the laws of nature, and because our experience of those laws is uniform and consistent, no amount of testimony should ever be enough to convince a reasonable person that a miracle actually happened. In other words, the deck is stacked before any evidence is even considered. A strict, unbending regularity of nature is assumed as the starting premise, which conveniently guarantees the conclusion that miracles can't be believed. But philosophers, including secular ones, have pointed out a real problem with that reasoning. It's circular. Hume's argument only works if you've already assumed, before looking at any specific evidence, that natural law can never actually be suspended for any reason. That's not a scientific finding. That's a philosophical assumption smuggled in at the start, dressed up to look like the conclusion of an argument. A truly open-minded, evidence-based approach would examine the specific historical evidence for a particular claimed event, rather than ruling it out in advance by definition. This matters because it shows that rejecting miracles isn't a purely scientific stance handed down by objective data. It's a philosophical commitment, a choice about what kind of universe you've already decided you're living in, before you've even looked at the evidence in front of you. Part 4. Real scientists who held both. This isn't just a theoretical argument. It has real historical weight behind it. Isaac Newton, arguably the most important physicist in history, wrote more about theology than physics and held a firm belief in the miracles recorded in Scripture, while also discovering the very laws of motion and gravity that describe the ordinary, consistent behavior of the physical universe. Blaise Pascal, a brilliant mathematician and physicist who helped lay foundations for probability theory, was also a devout Christian who wrote extensively defending the reasonableness of miraculous events. Georges Lemaitre, the priest physicist who gave us the Big Bang Theory, held that God could act within and beyond the physical laws he had, in his own view, ordained in the first place. These weren't scientists in spite of their belief in miracles. Their confidence that the universe was rational and law-governed enough to be studied scientifically, and their belief that its author retained the freedom to act beyond those laws on rare occasions, came from the exact same theological conviction. So, can a real scientist believe in miracles? Not only can they, the deeper you trace the philosophical roots of the scientific method itself, the more it looks like science quietly depends on assumptions that fit far more naturally into a theistic universe than a purely materialist one. A universe that is ordinarily rational, consistent, and law-governed, made by a rational lawgiver who occasionally acts with purpose outside the ordinary pattern. That's not a contradiction. That's a coherent picture. And it's the picture many of history's greatest scientists actually held. Thanks for watching. If this gave you something to think about, consider subscribing, and I'll see you in the next one.